we're going to be looking at an assertion that the Daily Mail in the UK makes towards the end of the sequence of articles that I've brought up that says, hey, this could be defamation again. And we're going to look at that. But first, we have to understand some of what was said. Obviously, there's more said here in a 30-minute interview. But having looked at a number of the articles, having looked at clips from this interview myself, this is the big stuff that was captured by all of the press here. And that would be most important in a defamatory context anyway. So we're looking at the Today Show exclusive. Amber Heard says she'll stand by every word of her testimony until her dying day, which in and of itself as a statement isn't really problematic, because the statement is just saying, I believe in what I said, and the jury got it wrong. It's not actually restating what was said in that litigation context, as we talked about when we covered the trial. What you say in court is privileged. It can't be defamatory. It's what we call the litigation privilege. If there weren't that privilege, we'd have all sorts of problems with accusing people of things that are ultimately found to be innocent of them, et cetera, et cetera. So the court is a special place where you basically get free reign to say what you will, obviously under the rules of evidence and with a judge telling you what can and can't come in, that kind of thing. But as the Today Show says, nearly 2 weeks after a jury ruled that she had defamed her ex-husband, Johnny Depp, Amber Heard continues to defend herself. In an exclusive interview with Savannah Guthrie, airing in 2 parts Tuesday and Wednesday this week on Today, and in a special Friday on Dateline, the Aquaman actor said she won't back down from her testimony in court and that Depp physically and psychologically abused her. To my dying day, I will stand by every word of my testimony, Heard said in the interview regarding the former couple's high-profile defamation case. 7-person jury in that case ultimately ruled in Depp's favor after finding clear and convincing evidence that Heard defamed him. Stop. So the clear and convincing standard was on the actual malice component. The actual malice component basically fell away and was easy for the jury to find one direction or the other because these two people were in the room, which means if they have diametrically opposed stories, one of them is lying on almost every instance that they wound up discussing. So that's the clear and convincing standard. That wasn't the tricky part. The actual proof for the majority of this, whether it was defamatory, etc., is the preponderance of evidence, that 50% plus one scintilla that we talk about in other contexts. He was awarded $15 million in compensatory and punitive damages. A judge reduced the punitive damages, making the total $10.4 million. Now it's actually, I believe it's $10.35 million, rounded up. That's fine. But also I wanted to point out this sentence is at least a little odd because the judge did reduce it because the statute required the judge to reduce it. So this to me sounds like, if I'm not familiar with the case, the judge made some kind of judgment, and that isn't what happened. There was no judgment here. The rule is 350 is the maximum, 350 it thus became. So I would like to see a little bit more contours around this. I can't stop analyzing how things are portrayed in stories, even though I'm just trying to get the facts out. And so I highlighted these 2 sentences for you. Speaking to Heard, Savannah touched on the toll of audio recordings presented to the jury to corroborate both Heard and Depp's testimonies. Those recordings became a central talking point online and in the courtroom because they're powerful, as Depp's legal team called into question Heard's credibility, as the opposing legal team is supposed to do. I'm looking at a transcript, I believe this is Guthrie saying this right here, that says, he says, you start physical fights, and you say, I did start a physical fight. I can't promise you I won't get physical again, Savannah read, adding, this is in black and white. I understand context, but you're testifying and you're telling me today I never started a physical fight, and here you are on tape saying that you did. In response, Heard reiterated her testimony during the trial in which she claimed to only become physical with her ex-husband when trying to defend herself. So here's Amber Heard. As I testified on the stand about this, is this when your life is at risk? Not only will you take the blame for things that you shouldn't take the blame for, but when you're in an abusive dynamic, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, you don't have the resources that, say, you or I do, with the luxury of saying, hey, this is black and white, because it's anything but when you're living in it. So in this particular kind of component of the interview, you've got the interviewer here saying, look, we've got audio that says you won't promise to not be physical again, and you started a physical fight, and you're saying that you didn't. And your response really isn't an answer, at least as presented in this article, to that point. It is the notion that says, well, when you're in the maelstrom here, things happen, right? Because it's not black and white when you're in that kind of context. Following up with Heard's assertion that she only became physical in response to violence, Savannah pointed to another tape that came up during the trial. You're taunting him, and this is the tell the world, and saying, oh, tell the world, Johnny Depp, I, a man, am a victim of domestic violence, Savannah said of the audio. And I've said it in a number of places now at this point, but it was when this audio was introduced that I really started thinking that Johnny Depp was going to win the case, or more specifically, that he had the chance of winning the case, because it was the first time that I really could reflect on what had been told to us and say, yes, this can be seen effectively as Amber Heard being the abuser, that she is absolutely taunting him in that audio, and she's taunting him in other audios as well. And Savannah Guthrie is wise to bring it up here. But basically, Amber Heard doesn't respond to the substance of that. At this point in the interview, she says 20-second clips or the transcripts of them are not representative of even the 2 hours or the 3 hours that those clips are excerpted from. And to some extent, that makes sense, right? You can't just pull out 15 seconds of somebody saying something in a 3-hour argument. And God knows when you get into these big, long arguments with a spouse or significant other, they can tailspin and go all over the place, as I think a lot of us have experience with. But she doesn't respond, right? It's worth noting that when you come out with this and say, look, you should talk about the tell the world, and you say, well, that doesn't represent everything that was happening. Okay, that's fine, but you didn't answer my question. Directing the interview to the closing argument, Savannah touched on a moment in which Depp's lawyer called Heard's testimony the performance of a lifetime and accused her of acting for the jury. And here's where we get that weird quote that we were talking about earlier. Says the lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers. It sounds just that weird if you watch it in interview form. I had listened to weeks of testimony insinuating that, or saying quite directly that, you know, I'm a terrible actress. So I'm a bit confused how I could be both. And that's an interesting answer. It's fair in terms of, just what's being accused. She's being accused of the performance of a lifetime. She says, I thought I was a bad actress. And Johnny Depp's a great actor, right? That's what the scissors for fingers actually is that he can give a performance of a lifetime, potentially even better than her. And I think we'd all agree at this point. But it's not fair for them to accuse her of giving a performance when they have a very gifted actor as their client at the same time. Now, could you say it better? Could you say it like I just did? Absolutely. Instead, you make it sound really weird and bring in Edward Scissorhands. Now, I will also say this. When they say it was a performance of a lifetime, they're really just highlighting the performance part. And I think if she's being honest with herself, and I can never tell on this, she understands that. They aren't actually saying she gave a great performance. That's not what Depp's team would be doing. They're saying that she gave a performance. And so when she says, well, if I'm such a bad actress, how could it be the performance of a lifetime? Well, in all honesty, and not to be too much of a dig, it could be the performance of your lifetime and not the performance of Johnny Depp's lifetime or Meryl Streep's lifetime or what have you. Either way, they're not intending to compliment your acting capabilities in this context. And I mean, I think that's clear on its face. So this isn't a great response either to that particular situation. Heard and Savannah also spoke about the First Amendment, a right the actor lamented on an Instagram that she felt she'd lost as a result of the trial. And Savannah says, here's the thing about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects free speech, but it doesn't protect lies that amount to defamation. And that was the issue in the case, Savannah noted, emphasizing that truth was at the heart of the trial and what the jury was tasked with determining. That's right, folks. The jury had to say that these things weren't truthful because truth is an absolute defense to defamation. So the jury really did find that what she was accusing Johnny Depp of was untruthful. Can you go there and say the jury was wrong? Absolutely. You are allowed to critique whatever you like, and you can critique what happened in court in any case. That's okay. But when you've been found by a jury to have an accusation like Johnny Depp abused me and go out with it in an interview context again and again, and we'll see even more kind of potentially damning quotes in just a minute, that's going to potentially expose you to legal liability again, even though Amber Heard finishes off, and the Today article finishes off here with, and that's all I spoke, it's truth, and I spoke it to power, and I paid the price. So Amber Heard's position here is that she only ever told the truth, and this is what happens to an Amber Heard who tells the truth, quote unquote, in court. Now, we can evaluate the court for ourselves. I find this absolutely incredible, literally But she's within her rights to feel scorned by the court system. Where it becomes trouble is in this kind of doubling down, and more specifically in doubling down in some specific way. So here's the Daily Mail again. And this is actually not the article that we're going to be looking at with respect to defamation, but this is the Daily Mail summarizing things. They have some pretty good summaries. We also got a Hollywood Reporter article that has some pretty good summaries. And I was really interested in what some of these outlets that are covering this case and this interview a little bit more strongly were pulling out, right? Because those are the things that are going to be the most important. Those are the things that are getting a megaphone or a multiplier applied to them going out in places like these outlets. And that's going to be what's potentially the most damaging to Johnny Depp and his team, or the Johnny Depps of the world. Here, Daily Mail says she was speaking out about an unfair verdict in the former couple's $8 million defamation trial, which it kind of is an $8 million defamation trial. It's a little bit too loose with what actually happened here, but that's all right. During the sit-down interview, which was pre-recorded on Thursday after the actress flew into New York on a private jet from Washington, Heard also accused the jurors in the trial of being duped by her ex-husband, branding him as nothing more than a fantastic actor who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers, in a bizarre reference to his performance as Edward Scissorhands in Tim Burton's 1990 movie. And we hear it again. The quote says, "The lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers. I'm a bit confused how I could be giving a great performance and also be a terrible actress." But despite a jury ruling overwhelmingly in her ex-husband's favor, finding Heard guilty on 3 counts of defamation against him, the actress refused to walk back her claims of abuse, instead doubling down on her allegations that he was physically violent towards her and accusing him of lying on the stand when he said that he never hit her. "He said he never hit you. Is that a lie?" To which Heard responded bluntly, "Yes, it is." Now that's interesting, because here you have just accused Johnny Depp of being a physical abuser, which, in large part, as best anybody could tell, the jury in Virginia found to be false. That the implied statement was this, put forth in your 2018 Washington Post opinion editorial. They found that to be false, and now you are going on national news and saying, "Yes, he hit me. To my dying day, I will stand by every word of my testimony," which, again, I don't find to be problematic in and of itself, because you're always allowed to stand by your testimony and you're always allowed to critique the justice system. That's the nature of the First Amendment. I know we joke about that coming up in Amber Heard's defense, but there are kernels of truth there. And it's one of the things we'll be talking about with respect to injunction as well. We scroll down a little bit more. Heard also accused Depp's lawyers, Vasquez and her associate, Benjamin Chew. What a great description of that relationship, right? Benjamin Chew, senior partner and certified badass, but he is the associate of Camille Vasquez by the time the trial ends, of trying to distract the jury from the real issues during the trial, conceding that they had done a better job of that than her own legal team. When grilled by Guthrie about audio clips that were played during the 6-week trial, Heard insisted that she only ever responded to physical violence, but she never instigated it. "I know much has been made of these audio tapes," she said. "They were first leaked online after being edited. What you would hear in these clips was not evidence of what was happening. It was evidence of a negotiation, of how to talk about that with your abuser." Now, the weird thing about this particular defense is that Amber Heard's team used the audio against Johnny Depp, or tried to, at least, obviously failing as far as the jury was concerned, but they offered that as proof of what was said in these various conversations, and not just negotiation with how to talk about things with your abuser. Obviously, and this was the big part of the trial for the whole 6 weeks that it went down, is that it was very easy to take either side's argument and apply it to the other party. So what it really came down to was which party you believed, which party seemed the more sincere. And after watching the trial, it seemed clear that Johnny Depp's version of events, of the world around him, seemed more sincere, more likely, more easily found to be true than what Amber Heard was asserting. So once you have this kind of stuff that you could basically apply either direction, you're mostly just evaluating the credibility of the two individuals in front of you. Heard also took aim at the witnesses who testified on Depp's behalf during the trial, branding them as paid employees and randos, and accusing them of filing rank, and supporting the person they depend on. "I did do and say horrible, regrettable things throughout my relationship," she confessed. "I behaved in horrible, almost unrecognizable to myself ways. I have so much regret. I freely and hopefully and voluntarily talked about what I did. This is not what happened. I talked about the horrible language. I talked about being pushed to the extent where I didn't even know the difference between right and wrong. If you go and watch her testimony, and you can see this, she testifies for 3 separate days. You do not get an image of an individual who was freely and voluntarily talking about what they did in a negative light. One of the big problems with her testimony was that she presented, either on her own strategic impulse or her team's, as a very innocent person that was tyrannized by Johnny Depp, the monster man. And if she had presented it a little bit more like Johnny Depp, there is every possibility that she could have had the finding come in her favor. That did not happen. That's how the jury arrived at its decision. You don't need other reasons to believe the jury did find against her, like social media corruption, etc. But she is fixated on that. She has a little bit more testimony here. We have more pictures from the Daily Mail. I will put it this way. How could they make a judgment? How could they not come to that conclusion that I couldn't be believed? She said. They had sat in those seats and heard over 3 weeks of nonstop, relentless testimony from paid employees and towards the end of the trial, randos, as I say. And I assume that's Morgan Tremaine. That's the manager of the Hicksville. I don't blame them. I actually understand. He's a beloved character and people feel that they know him. He's a fantastic actor. Again, how could they, after listening to 3.5 months of testimony about how I was an uncredible person, not believe a word that came out of my mouth? And again, this is essentially deflection, right? When you look at this kind of answer, it's the jury didn't believe me because Johnny Depp had too many paid people and too many randos. Now, weirdly, the randos are actually some of the more effective people that Johnny Depp had brought in, because those randos, in large part, things like the police officers and whatnot, don't have a vested interest in Johnny Depp or Amber Heard. Now, can you argue the fact that the TMZ guy or the Hicksville guy were acting through social media and potentially wanted a little publicity? Yes, Elaine Bredehoff tries to do that in her cross-examination. The problem that Amber Heard has is that her own witnesses don't quite corroborate the same story that she's telling, and everybody on the other side says almost all of it is false. So you once again get into this diametrically opposed world state, and which is the more believable winds up being Johnny Depp. I really, truly believe that's how the jury finds in that direction, and not with, well, how could they believe me after they had a plaintiff's case? That's how these things work. They question your credibility, and then you show that you are credible. And what happened in this case was that they questioned your credibility, and you showed why it was so incredible. And that's you. That's your story. That's your team. That's what you put forth in front of the court. So we have a lot of excuse making. We have a lot of deflection. Again, I mean, I don't know that that's unusual. It's kind of what we would expect from this particular individual, having observed the case that was presented over the course of a couple of months. But it doesn't do much for her. Heard, who says she was subjected to hate and vitriol online. I don't know that you actually need the says she was. She definitely was. Throughout the trial and in the wake of the verdict, doubled down on claims previously made by her lawyer that the trial was biased by social media campaigns, with the Aquaman actress branding the final verdict unfair. Even somebody who is sure I'm deserving of all of this hate and vitriol, even if you think I am lying, you still couldn't look me in the eye that you think on social media there's been a fair representation, she said. You cannot tell me that you think that this has been fair. Well, that's an interesting question, right? I've said in this space and elsewhere that there are corners of the internet that I think went way too far with some of this stuff. That we like to do. Reasonable minds can differ here in this space. I like to bring that to the various panels that I participate on. And certainly early on, before we really could have any notion of which direction this was going, social media went very far with things against Amber Heard. That said, it's not social media's job to be quote unquote fair. And it's also the fact that social media and people making memes or what have you had access to more information and more evidence earlier than I did on this stuff, or earlier than the jury did, right? Because this has been going on for years and years and years, and people were invested in finding out some of this information. And so they did. So by the time they're making some of these videos, they know more than I do. They know the Tell the World Johnny audio is out there, which I still find to be very, very damning to Amber Heard's case. But I will say this, I don't think the internet covered itself in glory for what was a fairly serious set of circumstances. I can say both. I think, and I'm proud of participating in what I did with talking about this trial, but I do think that some corners of the internet didn't treat it with the even modicum of seriousness that it deserved. And that might be okay with you. Reasonable minds can differ on this. Your mileage may vary as to where the line is on these things. But I think that even if you are okay with maybe more than I am, that there are things that cross whatever line you might otherwise hold. I don't care what anyone thinks about me or what judgments you want to make about what happened in the privacy of my own home in my marriage behind closed doors. I don't presume the average person should know those things, so I don't take it personally. So she says there's hate and vitriol. She says it's undeserved, but she doesn't take it personally. You have this kind of whipsaw effect with a lot of these answers, and that's fine. That's how people are. But certainly if your credibility is questioned, you probably don't want to be doing this kind of thing quite as much as you are. During an appearance on the Today Show, Bretta Hoff, Elaine, was asked if the Aquaman actress would be able to pay the damages she owes Depp after a jury vindicated his claims that she lied by accusing him of abuse during their marriage, to which she replied, no, absolutely not. Keep that in your pocket because that's going to come back as something of interest. The lawyer also echoed her client's thoughts of the verdict, blasting it as a significant setback for women. It's a horrible message. It's a setback, a significant setback, because that's exactly what it means. Unless you pull out your phone and your video your spouse or your significant other beating you effectively, you won't be believed. And this is Elaine and Amber going out there. This is the problem that a lot of people have with this. This is the message that this group is sending. And it's false. It's a false message. In the situations presented by Amber Heard, with the stories that she told, with her history of documentation, all of those things go into questioning her credibility. But God, no, you don't need a video. What you need is credibility. And you, if you're Amber Heard, or your client, if you're Elaine Bredehoff, had none at that point in the trial. And honestly, it would probably be helpful to your client if you were explaining these things to her rather than some rando on YouTube like myself. As for Ben Chu, my view is that social media played no role whatsoever. This was a decision made by the jury on the evidence. It was overwhelmingly in Depp's favor. So that's the Daily Mail. That's the Daily Mail covering this at this point. Now we're going to look at our own shores, the Hollywood Reporter, also covering some of the things that came out of this interview and what popped out to them. So every word of my testimony has popped out in all three locations. Again, I actually think that sounds almost lawyer vetted. That's probably okay to say. It's when you get into he's lying, right? To my dying day, I will stand by every word of my testimony. I spoke truth to power and I paid the price. Okay, probably fine. Speaking now 2 weeks after the verdict, Heard called the jury's decision surreal and difficult and said the trial is an example of the social media era running amok. The jury is not immune to that, she said, of it being impossible for an unsequestered Virginia jury to avoid seeing how the widely covered trial played out online. Even if you think I'm lying, you still couldn't look me in the eye and tell me that you think on social media there's been a fair representation. This notion, by the way, that it's impossible for the jury to have avoided the social media impact of justice for Johnny Depp or I stand with Amber Heard or what have you, is very, very questionable in and of itself, because you have absolutely no evidence. You have nobody saying anything. You have no jurors telling you anything about this. But also, as others have pointed out, you are the ones that brought the hashtags in online. You're the ones that brought the social media experts in as part of your damages claim. You're the one that sat on the stand, Amber Heard, and said, all you have to do is look me up to see how poorly I'm being treated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you say the jury is not immune to that. You're making an assumption. You are speculating as to what the impact on the jury was in a very potentially damaging way. Honestly, if we knew who the jurors were at this point in time, this is the kind of thing that might be defamatory in and of itself. But you're allowed to question the process. And certainly it is clear now from what Elaine has said and from what Amber has said that the sequestering of the jury is going to be part of your appeals complaint. Now, we don't usually sequester juries here. It's a very unusual set of events, and certainly not in civil cases. So it's going to be a tough road for them to go down in order to make this case. But that clearly is one of the things that they intend to argue. As the Hollywood Reporter's legal writer Winston Cho wrote, this is interesting, the U.S. verdict suggests that jurors rejected Heard's central theory of the case, that if there was even one instance of abuse, she should win because her statements would then be true. The jury was swayed, he notes, by Depp's arguments that Heard faked her injuries, which she documented with photographs and audio recordings to boost her career by claiming her Me Too moment. This is an amazing paragraph, right? Because if you're reading this very closely, what you are reading is the Hollywood Reporter essentially reproducing what apparently they'd already written, which is not the notion that the jury found that there was no abuse in this relationship from Johnny Depp, but that effectively what they found was that it took more than one case and that we could just evaluate the people against each other. Nothing that anybody knows about how the jurors might have come to their conclusion reflects this analysis. This is the analysis that lets Amber Heard say what she is saying. This is the analysis that is suggestive of a jury trial that was effectively wrongly decided, right? Because Ben Rottenborn's theory of the case, if Johnny Depp committed one act of abuse, makes him an abuser, makes it non-defamatory, is fundamentally legally correct. So the jury not adopting it is fundamentally legally wrong. But what we do know is that a unanimous group of 7 Virginians in a closed room found her statements to be defamatory, which doesn't suggest anything like this. It suggests that they found that her statements were fundamentally false. And so this is an interesting portion of the Hollywood Reporter article, and you see some of what we've otherwise talked about in Hangouts and Headlines right here. I never had to instigate it. I responded to it, she told Guthrie. When you're living in violence and it becomes normal, as I testified to, you have to adapt. This is when Savannah Guthrie apparently presents the other audios that says that you started fights. Citing Depp saying he never hit Heard, Guthrie asked, is that a lie? Heard responded, yes, it is. That to me is probably the biggest issue, if she has any right here. And when speaking to Guthrie, Heard said she fears a possible response from Depp. I'm scared that no matter what I do, no matter what I say and how I say it, every step that I take will present another opportunity for this sort of silencing, which is what I guess a defamation lawsuit is meant to do. It's meant to take your voice. No. A defamation lawsuit is meant to prevent falsehoods that negatively impact another's business or livelihood from being allowed. First Amendment, very broad freedom of speech in the United States, but you aren't allowed to just lie about people to their harm. You can do lies, right? People that go on social media and say lying is not legal are wrong. If you go and you tell your significant other that you're working late at work, but you actually go off to the bar before heading home, that is something that is legal. It is not defamatory. However, if you go and tell the world that your significant other is a murderer and they just haven't been discovered yet, when that isn't true, that is defamation, and that is a potential problem for you from a legal standpoint. That is the difference. Lies, all lies, are not illegal. Lies that are defamatory, that harm the reputation or business prospects of another, are. In a statement obtained by the Hollywood Reporter, a spokesperson said of Heard speaking out, Johnny Depp's legal team blanketed the media for days after the verdict with numerous statements and interviews on television, and Depp himself did the same on social media. Ms. Heard simply intended to respond to what they aggressively did last week. She did so by expressing her thoughts and feelings, much of which she was not allowed to do on the witness stand. This is absolutely unbelievable. And this is the fourth time that an Amber Heard spokesperson has come out and basically said that all she's doing is responding to the aggressive actions of the Johnny Depp team, when what actually happened, what we saw in real time, it's only 2 weeks. Most of us have memories that can last that long, is that Elaine Bredehoft was sent out by Amber Heard's team first to get out and say the jury was corrupted and we have all these problems and the evidence was suppressed and we had a mountain of evidence and it's all misogyny or what have you. She goes out with that. And then Johnny Depp starts a TikTok and his crew goes out there with some fairly benign interviews. And now she responds with an interview that is significantly more attacking. And I will tell you this, just conceptually, when you're out there in your interview saying, I didn't initiate violence, I only ever reacted to it, and then your spokespeople are here describing what isn't violence, but a sequence of rhetorical flourishes and explaining it to us in a way that doesn't match our experience watching it in real time, well, you've once again undercut your credibility for seemingly the 50th time in the last 2 months. So none of this is working out for her, in my opinion, but that's how you get to the Daily Mail having a headline that says, This could spur another lawsuit. Legal experts reveal Johnny Depp could take ex-wife Amber Heard to court for republishing her abuse allegations against him in Today interview. That's actually not republishing in that way. It's publishing again. We'll talk about that in a second as well. But here the Daily Mail is. Again, this is the actual headline that I used for the thumbnail of this article. And we get Amber Heard has opened the door for Johnny Depp to sue her once again. During the explosive interview, which was pre-recorded on Thursday in New York City, the actress, 36, called the verdict in her defamation trial against Depp unfair and insisted that she is going to stand by every word of her testimony until the day she dies. The 36-year-old, they mentioned that she's 36 a lot. I don't know what I would describe the Daily Mail's writing style as, but it is a little odd. Doubled down on her allegations that Depp was physically violent towards her during their 1 year of marriage and accused him of lying on the stand when he said that he never hit her. Now, New York-based entertainment lawyer Nicole Half, who works at Romano Law, has revealed exclusively to DailyMail.com how Heard's comments could well backfire and result in her getting sued by the Pirates of the Caribbean star once again. I know it's hard to write articles where you have to reference the same people over and over again, but I still find it funny. It's always Aquaman star this or Pirates of the Caribbean star that. I did want to look up this particular law firm and this particular individual because I was like, that's a weird kind of call out. This is the kind of call out that you actually have as part of what are you going to give me? You're going to give me attribution. And so I did look them up, and it turns out that this law firm is, as best as I can describe it, LawTube by other means, right? We've got here videos from Romano Law, news coverage with an expert legal media analyst. Our managing attorney, Dominic Romano, serves a legal media analyst and provides insights on news channels, including NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox, and Bloomberg. Dominic Romano has a strong foundation in business and entertainment law. He offers critical insight on mainstream media cases involving celebrities, athletes, sports, businesses, and organizations to the audience. And we see here, copyright attorney explains Top Gun Maverick lawsuit. I have a video here on that. Dominic Romano on Wake Up with Cheddar. Not familiar with that one. Entertainment attorney discusses verdict in Depp versus Heard trial. Obviously, talked a lot about that. Did Heard defame Depp in 2018? Baldwin on the Rust shooting. Have a video about that. So, hey, we've got other ways to do this kind of thing, and they go out and do these kinds of interviews and talk with folks like the Daily Mail or CNN or NBC, and more power to them. But it was interesting to go see exactly what these folks are doing. Yes, this interview could count as a new publication under the law, which could spur a third lawsuit, the attorney explained. And that attorney is right. When we talk about publications, when we talk about libel, it's every instance of something that is Hoeg, that is concrete, that you can otherwise see, record, and know still is in existence, right? Slander is the ephemeral speech that goes away out with the wind, and libel is when it's printed, and that can be printed in writing, that can be printed on vinyl in record form. Here in 2022, that can be printed in today's show YouTube video format. So this is another publication. This video that I'm making right now is a publication. So you're always evaluating when you make something, whether or not you're defaming another. So this lawyer is right. This is obviously a new publication of these particular facts on hand. And then the question is, did something that you say in that publication rise to the level of defamation? As I've said, did he lie on the stand? Yes, he did. Could. Because that is, at least by implication, as we know it from the 2018 Washington Post op-ed, is the kind of implication that says Johnny Depp is a domestic abuser. In fact, it's closer to that than the 3 sentences that were used in the Washington Post article. So is this defamatory? Potentially. Is the statement that she made in their Instagram post defamatory? At least one sentence is, as we've talked about in the past. Those are the possibilities there. Now, is Johnny Depp likely to go and have another lawsuit against this person because it's so expensive and takes so much time to do these things? No. But there are other options that we'll talk about in just a second. Daily Mail then brings up republication as a definition. That's wrong. Good try, Daily Mail. Heard's lawyers have already stated that she cannot pay the original judgment. Remember, I told you to put that in your pocket. Keep it in your pocket. Check on it. Make sure it's still there because we're going to get back to that in just a minute. And I think that's all the Daily Mail has on this. We've got the lies. To my dying day, I'll stand by my testimony. And Heard's also insisted that the jury's decision was influenced by unfair social media representation. So she would be potentially defaming the jury, but the jury isn't known, so that you can't really make a defamation case on that. Is Johnny Depp likely to sue over this defamation? No, because it's an enormous process. But what he could do is ask the Virginia courts for an injunction. Now, what does that mean? I've pulled up an article from a law firm here. Like I said, I'm not a Virginia attorney, but most jurisdictions are going to have similar concepts to this. You want an injunction from the court, you're going to have to go show the court a couple of things. One, that money doesn't make you whole. Money is the way that the law works. When we talk about remedies that the court system can afford you, we talk about equitable remedies and we talk about legal remedies. Legal remedies, that's cash dollars, y'all. That is money that they can order be exchanged from one person to another. Here, the court has engaged in a legal remedy of ordering Amber Heard to pay Johnny Depp about $10 million. But Amber Heard's continuing to go out there. Amber Heard's continuing to go out there on her Instagram. Amber Heard's continuing to go out there on the Today Show. So what could a plaintiff here do? They won their case. Fundamentally, in the interests of justice, we look at this and say it would be unfair for the defendant who has been found to defame the plaintiff with the statement of the plaintiff domestically abused me, at least as implied in the Washington Post op-ed, to go out there with that assertion again and again and again. This defames him. A jury found it. It hurts his reputation and it hurts his business goodwill. So what can be done? And the answer is you can ask the court for an equitable remedy, not money, but an actual order, either ordering someone to do something, or in this case, ordering them to not do something. And what would that look like? That would be effectively saying Amber Heard is no longer permitted to assert that Johnny Depp abused her. Now, as you can imagine, that's a potential problem in the overall constitutional framework of the United States, because the First Amendment says, hey, you shall have freedom of speech. But as Savannah Guthrie pointed out, that doesn't extend as far as defamation, as falsehoods that harm the reputation of another. So here we have a kind of Virginia analysis of what that looks like in this respect. A defamatory statement or publication can cause serious damage to a person's business or professional reputation. Monetary damages are always available to the victim of defamation. We just saw that. But in some cases, damages do not fit a client's situation or needs. For example, in many circumstances, the person making the defamatory statements has done so on numerous occasions and continues to spread the harmful lies. Furthermore, some defendants have so few assets that they are essentially judgment-proof, meaning they have no incentive to stop repeating the defamation. Remember, I told you to put that in your pocket because they are now out there in the television setting saying that she doesn't have enough money to even pay the current judgment. So what redress can the court actually afford to Johnny Depp if he were to sue over these statements again? That's important. What good is a judgment against the speaker if the defamation is going to continue? Understandably, many businesses and individuals want the court to make the defamer stop, and Virginia courts can do so by granting an injunction in defamation cases. If the defamer refuses to comply, the court may hold the individual in contempt and impose additional damages or even jail time. However, a plaintiff has many hurdles to success in getting an injunction, and the impact of such an injunction may be limited. Two major requirements for a defamation injunction are, one, irreparable injury, and two, that the injunction not infringe the First Amendment freedom of speech. To obtain an injunction, the plaintiff must show that he or she has suffered irreparable harm, typically meaning that monetary damages are insufficient to make the plaintiff whole. And then they send us over to this case. They send us over to this case of D'Ambrosio versus D'Ambrosio. And if you ever see a headline to a case like this, you can bet that it's very likely a divorce proceeding, which is in fact the case in this particular instance. So we scroll down a little bit. We're reading what's happening here. And we see that James D'Ambrosio shares joint legal and physical custody of his child with the appellee, his former wife. D'Ambrosio appeals an order entered by the trial court, contending that the trial court erred when it modified a custody decree. We don't care about that. And entered an injunction prohibiting D'Ambrosio from making defamatory comments about Fowler to third parties. So this is, the husband was prohibited from saying defamatory things to third parties about his ex-wife. And if you read that and you look at that, one of the things that should jump off the page at you, especially if you're in law school or otherwise looking at First Amendment jurisprudence, is that this is really, really broad. What in the world is a defamatory comment without a definition, right? We don't even know that in this case that we're looking at right this second, and it's been litigated for 2 months. So what's a defamatory comment? That's too broad. To all third parties, probably also too broad. And that's one of the reasons why this case is going to stand for the proposition that the court can come in and say, no. You can't give an injunction that looks like this. But it doesn't prevent the Johnny Depps of the world from going and seeking and even winning an injunction, because there's much more going on here. We have to scroll to the bottom because that's where they actually discuss this. Here we go. Unquestionably, An injunction is an extraordinary remedy. Thus, to secure an injunction, a party must show irreparable harm and the lack of an adequate remedy at law. Also, an injunction must be specific in its terms, and it must define the exact extent of its operation so that there may be compliance. In other words, the injunction should set forth what is enjoined in a clear and certain manner, and its meaning should not be left for speculation or conjecture. Here, the injunction meets none of these requirements. First, Fowler offered no evidence that absent the injunction, she would be irreparably harmed. So here, one of the things that you can say is, well, if you're Johnny Depp, I'm concerned that she has absolutely no reason to not continue defaming me because as it stands, I already have a judgment that eats up all of her assets. That's at least what Elaine Bredehoff has suggested and what Amber Heard has suggested herself. So when we're talking about this, Your Honor, I can offer that I would be irreparably harmed by not getting this injunction because there is no way that the law can afford me redress for the harm that I would otherwise experience. A jury has already found that these kinds of statements are defamatory. And if Amber Heard can just go out there and keep saying them, and my $10 million verdict is already everything that she has, then there is no reason that she will stop just because of a damage award. And that means that I'm in trouble. And I can offer that evidence with Elaine Bredehoff's own damn statement on national television, which is a heck of a thing to have in your back pocket. So, you know, they're continuing to kill it with what they're revealing in their interviews. That's why I told you to pay attention to those particular statements. Second, Fowler failed to demonstrate that she had no adequate remedy in law. So these are the same kinds of things. These are the same sides of a different coin, essentially. Hey, they don't have the money to pay me. I will be irreparably harmed because this will harm me and I can't get redress. And there is no adequate remedy because money doesn't make me whole. Third, the injunction fails to sufficiently define the prohibited conduct and therefore is vague and overbroad. And this is the easy one to answer if you're Johnny Depp. Here is what I want them to be enjoined from saying. I abused her. Anything that implies that I abused her, a jury has found it to be defamatory. I did not abuse her. The jury sided with me. She should be prohibited and enjoined from saying those things. You could do it to third parties. And if you wanted to narrow that to publications or what have you, you could potentially do that as well. So that's why this fails. It's too vague and overbroad. No evidence was presented at all on the irreparable harm concept, but that makes it hurdles to overcome. It doesn't mean that they can't be overcome. In one recent case, says this article from this law firm, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia recognized one form of irreparable injury that is common to many defamation cases. A defendant won't stop defaming the plaintiff. Your Honor, they've done it twice in 2 weeks, at least, and probably more if we're really digging and we're bringing this injunction. The court reasoned that in some cases, because a defendant has repeatedly defamed someone, there is a danger that the plaintiff will have to return to the court after each future defamatory statement, creating a multiplicity of suits and denying the plaintiff closure. That is irreparable. It continues to hit me. I don't get the closure that the law has told me that I should get, and it will happen again and again and again. And I will spend more money on lawyers that can't get back to me. Additionally, some cases may result in damages insufficient to deter a wealthy defendant, but in other cases, even a substantial damage award may have no effect on someone who has no significant assets and is essentially judgment proof. The second requirement is that the injunction not infringe on First Amendment free speech rights. The First Amendment limits, among other things, the government's ability to place restraint on speech before it happens, which is precisely what an injunction to prevent future defamation would do. Courts will allow such an injunction, however, so long as the scope of the injunction is closely tailored to the statements the court has ruled are defamatory. We know what is defamatory. It is the implication that Johnny Depp is an abuser. And so they can enjoin that specifically. Not everything that could possibly be said, but that Johnny Depp is a domestic abuser against Amber Heard. So that is a possibility. And it is also possible that Johnny Depp's team is basically just happy letting her go out there and do all of this because every single time one of these interviews happens, it seems like they take themselves back a step or 3 or 8. Whether it's in the appeals process, whether it's in allowing their injunction to go through, every single time they talk, they appear to gather at least a little bit more on the Depp side of things. So it might be that they just decide to let her keep talking because for the most part, that court of public opinion notion is with them. And any analysis of an interview like this one comes with it. Again, the look at Amber Heard, the way she's answering these questions and saying, you remain completely uncredible. And so maybe Depp's team is otherwise happy. But could they seek an injunction? I believe that they could. Could they seek a defamation lawsuit? I believe that they could, but not that they would, because that's an enormous, expensive legal process, and it doesn't actually help them in any way that really matters. But could they get an injunction? And then could they use that injunction to potentially go and seek contempt of court kind of orders if this continues? Yeah, they could. And I think that they probably will. So those are the articles for today. I'm just collecting a few of the super chats that I have seen come in while we were talking about that. What do you think? What do you think of the potential for future defamation? What do you think for the future of a potential injunction kind of request or order from the Depp side of things? Do you think it's likely? Do you think it's less likely? Let me know.